Right, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if any ever heard of it before, but I'm going to try and explain about restorative justice or restorative practice. I'm just going to do a little bit of a role play in a few minutes, so I hope my acting is better than my singing the last night. But I'll just give you a brief history of it first. It started as far back as the late 70s in Canada, and the aim of it is to repair the harm that's done by a wrongdoing or a crime. And it aids both the person that's harmed and, believe it or not, the wrongdoer. I know people say the wrongdoer, they're scumbag or this and that and the other, they don't deserve it, but if you bear with me, I'll try and explain it anyway and give you the rundown of it and that. So it's used widely in North America, New Zealand, Australia, parts of the UK police force use it at the moment, and here in Ireland it's rolled out in Tala by a group called CDI, who I trained with, and down in Limerick, the Kale organisation involved in it in a larger scale. Basically then I'm just going to concentrate on a straightforward, simple crime and just trying to explain it in the restorative justice system as well as the normal system on it. So just going to start with, say, 78-year-old Mrs. Smith. Not a very effervescent person by any means, and that, but her house was broken into one night, €100 stolen, and Joe Bloggs down the road was charged with admitted it. So going through the normal system then, 6 months later, the Garda informed Mrs. Smith that Joe Bloggs had been charged with it, fined, and a bit of a warning. That's all he got over it. End of story. But Mrs. Smith is devastated because, as far as she's concerned, it's not the end of the story on it. So, and Joe Bloggs hasn't learned a lot either. He hasn't thought a lot about it. He just went through the system and that was it, and probably carried on with a life of crime. But just going back to the restorative part of it then. Say the day after the crime taking place, the Garda will come back to Mrs. Smith, explain to her how the restorative system works, and if she's interested, then he'll contact a coordinator to organise a conference or a circle, depends on when he's involved or whatever. So if Mrs. Smith agrees to it, then the coordinator will call, explain it fully to her, and then if she's still happy, he goes to Joe Bloggs and his family. If they have any sense, they'll engage with the two. But what happens then, within 2 weeks, to try and organise at a neutral venue, a conference, or it's only a circle in this case, so there's not many people involved. So say you do the homework in advance, explain exactly what's going to happen, and time your meeting then that you know what's going to happen, there's not going to be any surprises or further rows or anything like that takes place on it and that. So then the day of the conference, as I say, it can be from as little as 2 people up to 100 people. Some of them in America have even more on for a few days. Americans will always have to have a bigger anyway than that, I suppose. But you just get the people together then. It's an informal sort of a session with your chairs around, the coordinator in the middle, Joe Bloggs and his family on one side, his support, Mrs. Smith and her support on the other. So you just start with a few questions then. So you'd always start with the wrongdoer, and you'd have your set of questions out. So you start with Joe Bloggs. He tells Joe, Mrs. Smith's house was broken into on the 5th of November this year, €100 stolen. Can you tell us what happened that night? Right, so Joe comes along and says, right, I was walking down the street that night, seeing Mrs. Smith coming out of her house. She didn't close the door behind her, so as soon as she got around the corner, I done a U-turn, went into the house, had a look around a few different places, and searching around, eventually I found a jar in one of the presses, €100 into it, bingo. So just as I put the money into my pocket, I heard somebody coming. So I just bolted out of the house and went off home myself. And later on that night, the Gardaí called and I admitted the offence. Right, so next question then, Joe, what were you thinking of at the time? Well, I was in a fair bit of trouble that night. My girlfriend had a baby a few months ago. I owed lads a few pounds for drugs and they were threatening me that night, so I had to get money from somewhere on it, and I just happened to be walking by Mrs. Smith's house at the time. Right, and third question then, who was affected by what happened, Joe? And he says, I suppose Mrs. Smith had took her money, and my ma, I suppose, not too happy about it, but that was it, that's all he's concerned about. Then you go to the fourth question, and what needs to happen next? Well, sure, when I get a few pounds, maybe I'll pay Mrs. Smith back or whatever, and that. I'm not too worried about it at this stage or whatever, and that. So you just hold your fifth question till last, then I'll come back to it, because say thanks very much, Joe. We'll go to Mrs. Smith now and see her opinion of what happened. So you said to Mrs. Smith then, Mrs. Smith, can you tell us what happened that night? Yeah, well, it was my husband very ill in bed. I normally get the drugs for the week. It's a Monday night. I normally get the drugs for the week on a Monday, and I forgot And at 10 to 6 I looked up at the clock and panic on it. Hadn't got the drugs, the pharmacy was closing at 6 o'clock. So I'm not very able to feel. I just trottled off down to the shop, and lucky enough I met the pharmacy before it closed. But on the way back then I noticed my door was open. So just as I going up along the hallway, Joe Bloggs come running past me, knocked me to the ground, and I couldn't get up off the ground. So I was there for about half an hour or whatever, and lucky enough Mrs. Smith here comes in to see me every night, and she helped me up, and when you seen the money got me, rang the Gardaí. That's grand, Mrs. Smith. Next question then. I'm sorry, I meant to go over the page to the next question for Mrs. Smith on it. Her second question then was who was affected by what happened and how. So she go back to her, myself was very affected, said her life's in turmoil since, and my husband is in bed. He thought he was going to be killed that night. You hear so many stories now about old people being attacked in their homes and whatever and that, and our whole life is in bits. He was like going to bingo, he was like going to the shops, and we can't stir since. Our own family are thinking about putting us in a nursing home. It's just a nightmare on it. So that's grand, Mrs. Smith. What do you think needs to be happened to repair the damage? Well, we just need to know why Joe Smith attacked us. Was he watching our house for long? Is he going to come back and finish us off? Is he going to take more money on us? And most importantly, the €100 I had that saved for present for my grandchildren for Christmas. Now it's all gone and that. So our whole life is devastated on it, and that to recover from this on it. So you just go back then to Joe Bloggs, your fifth question. You say to Joe now, after hearing what Mrs. Smith had to say, have you anything further to say? So Joe would say then, right, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't realise that my own grandparents are in the same position. They live on their own, they're very frightened and that, and I didn't realise the harm I'd caused on it and that. The only way to move forward, I'll try and borrow money off my mum here and pay back Mrs. Smith then when I get the money to pay her back, and if we can do anything, maybe we'll do a few odd jobs around the house, do the messages for Mrs. Smith and her husband if they're agreeing to that. So generally at that stage then, I haven't time to go through it all, but generally you just sort of get together over a cup of tea or something, you draw up a bit of a contract on it, and you move forward from it. Now it's a simple thing, and you might think of this and work on it and that, but I'd imagine in a few years' time it's going to be big in Ireland as it is all over the rest of the world, and that it's proven to work on it. People might be sceptical about that, but it's definitely proven to work on it. So that's it in Restorative. So I just want to finish up then with a little bit of Facebook last year. I think it's very relevant in every part, apart from the restorative side of things. So the word judges me by the decisions I make, never does it see the options I had to choose from.